Okay, we are recording and transcribed.
Great. So the meeting will come to order. And the agenda has been distributed. Are there any additions or changes?
Gina, I have one,
Okay.
which is only including a termination update in the updates and discussions section.
Okay. Good to know. So then we can approve the agenda with that update. And the minutes had been distributed. Are there any corrections? And the minutes can be approved as presented. And we can move on.
Anybody feel like motioning that for Gina?
Second.
Okay.
That's Patrick and Jade.
Any
Perfect.
discussion? So moved.
You call the vote.
Oh, right. I'm calling the vote. Everyone in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Okay. So moved.
Any opposed? That sounded unanimous. We can go with that if not. Okay. Minutes approved. Public comment, we don't have anybody here with us. Any of you can as well. Okay. I'll go.
Numbers we need to know about. Thanks, Phil.
Yes, so the change here is from the last meeting is the AmeriCorps state competitive funds that were offered to ECO, the $600,341. That's their requested amount. That's what they were offered. I shared a little bit ahead of the meeting, but we're trying to get them to accept that money because as you can see, that's a large chunk of what we will ultimately have. The other change is the Vista grant came through. That was awarded, so our supervision grant is in place. The state commission support grant came through, so that is in place. And the commission investment fund is still tied up at Office of Management and Budget. Any questions about these? We'll obviously dig more into the AmeriCorps state stuff in a moment.
Whoops, I was talking, but my microphone was muted. I was going to say, I know Guy's not here, but in the email thread, he asked if staff were funded. And my impression was the state commission support or one of the line items did indicate that you all would have at least a year. So I just wanted to mention that.
So yeah, to dig in a tiny bit more, the state commission support grant is our base admin grant, and having that in place, we definitely exist in some capacity with some level of staffing for at least a year. The commission investment fund does pay portions of a couple staff salaries. We also have some carry forward money from this current year, so we should be okay. I need to get very accurate numbers from the business office at the end of June in terms of what exactly we're carrying over to get a better sense of how much money exactly we have. But generally speaking, there's a path forward without any substantial changes in staff at this point. Yes. Thank you.
Updates and discussions, partners, programs, and members.
Just a quick update on the AmeriCorps termination. So there was a joint report from the plaintiffs and the defendants last Friday. some meetings did happen, and that joint report was filed. So guidance on how to do these 3 bullet points: reinstate members promptly, pay them the full value of their living stipends, and pay the full value of their Siegel and AmeriCorps Education Awards, is due to us by the 27th. And a status report is due to the court by the 27th. In terms of the timeline, the defendants, federal government, has until July 18th to move to dismiss. They have not done so. They have not appealed so far. Whatever happens then, by July 18th, the plaintiffs have to file opposition to it if they're going to by August 8th, and then the defendants have to reply by August 22nd. This is all public information. I share this because you can see it could potentially be a pretty long time, at least a month, until we know exactly what the path forward will look like. So we will know how to reinstate members by the end of June, and then it's still another couple of weeks until we know for certain how to move forward. So in the meantime, no new members will be enrolled. And that likely will be the case through the end of this program here. Questions about that, Gina? Yes.
Thanks. I'm sorry, I need clarification. You're saying that the lawsuit did say that programs will be reinstated, or you're saying that might happen, or it might be dismissed?
So right now, the preliminary injunction says that programs will be reinstated, and the plaintiff states have asked for guidance on how exactly to do that. This is obviously a maneuver we don't typically do. And AmeriCorps has not provided clear enough guidance on how to do that. But we are moving in that direction. If AmeriCorps and the federal government were to decide to challenge, or to make them to file a motion to dismiss the suit, they would have to do that by July 18th. So that's kind of the point at which we know something about how this will move forward. In the meantime, we're waiting for that guidance so we can actually tell our programs so that we can have folks distill that for us and then tell our programs how to move forward. Any other questions on this? Patrick.
Yeah, feel free to just nod at me and say, I'm not going to get involved in this at all. And you probably don't know. Do you have any sense of what the likelihood of where we're going with this? And I'm asking you to prognosticate, and if you can't do that, just say, nope.
Yeah, we don't know exactly where it's headed, and we always follow the guidance given to us by folks who are members of the bar with legal backgrounds. We're going to stick with that plan. Yeah, good question though.
Kind of related to Patrick's question. I'm just curious in terms of timeline, Phil. When is like the point of no return? Maybe the feds come and say we're gonna appeal, kick the can down the road. When is it like a moot point from a programming perspective, if at all?
A moot point to
continue to pursue the case.
Yeah, so the hope is that even though new members will not be enrolled this program year, grantees could still have access to all of their money, and anyone who is serving as of April 25th can essentially have a path to be successful in service by their original end date. So that's sort of the best case scenario here.
Mm-hmm.
The practical operational reality of it is that, some of these answers are going to come far enough in the future. So for example, July 18th is when we'll understand how the feds intend to move this case forward. And that's, a month and a half away from the end of the program year for most of the impacted members. And then, there's only a few months left for grantees like Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, which would have had members enrolling in May and June to serve all the way through November. So we're not going to know in time to have those folks enroll, how they would have. So the impact on the ground, it's that essentially started the 25th of April. And it's definitely a different looking situation than it would have been otherwise for the rest of this program year, at least.
Yeah, I guess where I was going in addition to all of that is like, some of it's making the organizations whole. Some of it's maybe potentially being applied to the future if it makes sense to. If we can argue that the funds were guaranteed in some fashion, but anyway, we'll let the
true, too.
JDs sort it out.
Totally, yes.
All right, one more question from me. So in terms of the answer or motion to dismiss being July 18th, that's like all or nothing, or a specific program could be like, we're not doing this anymore, even though you let us have the opportunity.
That is the federal government's deadline to respond to this lawsuit, which will set I'm not doing a perfect job explaining this, but that sets the path for how the rest of the case will go. So programs, speaking of programs, all throughout this, they could kind of choose their level of involvement to some degree. And our understanding so far is that whatever process for moving forward, whatever the guidance says, will be sort of a batch. It's impossible to enroll every single member who was terminated individually again. And so whatever happens will be done sort of in a batch. And we don't know exactly how that works. That's the guidance we're waiting on. We have all the same questions that you do too.
Okay. But the plaintiffs mean like all AmeriCorps programs, not like VHCB, VYCC.
It's actually states. So there's 24 states and territories. So it's states are the plaintiffs, and then our programs are part of that through us.
Thank you.
Yep. And we've learned a lot in this process about how all of this works. But I think let's leave that there if folks don't mind, and move on. I am sorry that this is hard to see, but you were sent this. This is our funding chart from the competition. All it says is that ECO was chosen for competitive funding at their requested level and 24.0 through MSYs, and nothing else was. So that's the information we're working based upon today. And we're ready to move on to planning and visioning for the future, if you all are.
Yep.
So here's the formula timeline. Now we're meeting today. We're going to get clarification to applicants tomorrow. McKenna and I are going to do our best to get the applications open and e-grants really today or tomorrow. That's really our only options. And then hopefully folks can get things back to us by June 27th. We definitely need them back by July 7th. So we'll work with folks to see their own schedules and frankly, our own schedules with some pre-planned vacations and such coming up here to make sure that we are able to submit by July 11th to AmeriCorps. So that's just a review of this tight timeline we're on. And yes, we're already kind of behind where we would ideally be in terms of recruitment and all of that, but we're going for it. This is the request as of resubmission. So last meeting, you all authorized folks to rework their applications and submit them to us. Now is probably a good time. So Jade had posed some questions. Thank you for sending those in advance, but to kind of explain the situation. So the first question, does ECO's decision or decision so far, we're going to try to get them to take that grant, but assuming they move forward, not running a program, what happens? If they don't accept that competitive award, then that money does not come to Vermont at all. So that's one reason that we would love them to accept it. And in the scenario you all have to make decisions on today, that money doesn't factor in one way or another. So that's sort of the question for ECO is, and for us, is are we going to have that program or not? If we do have that program, they get all that money. If we don't, no one in Vermont gets that money. So that's how that piece works. And they do understand that. The redrafted applications, understanding that we all read them very quickly, but there were no major red flags in terms of, federal funding risks or priority risks or, things that would be of too much concern. Depending on what gets chosen for formula funding, we will work with those applicants, all the applicants that are chosen for funding, to really make sure of that and to button up their applications. But that's doable. And then all applicants to the competition are very aware of the situation that we're in. So after these resubmissions, we had a regularly scheduled program directors meeting, and all the programs were there, and we shared this same math problem that you're looking at with the 3 resubmitted formula applications. We're more than $500,000 short of being able to fund those requests. So everybody is very aware of this. Dream is aware of this as well. Jade, you asked if we can keep them in the loop. We absolutely can. They've been a great partner with their national direct, and we certainly support that. And for what it's worth, their national direct did receive continuation funding. So they will have an AmeriCorps grant on the national direct side. And so these 3 entities all know they're in the situation. And they know we're going to have to make hard decisions. You're going to have to make hard decisions. I will say that, just as kind of a reminder, we knew, even when we released the NOPO back in August of last year, that the conclusion of ARPA funding at AmeriCorps was going to result in a very tight competition. And, AmeriCorps had told us they weren't going to be able to fund everything that they had been competitively funding. And so we've sort of known about this cliff back in, I don't even remember now, was it April? I guess it was April. Staff met with each applicant and explained, like, there's a very high chance that we are going to have to make difficult decisions when it comes down to it. We're very unlikely to hold the level of competitive funding we had at that time. So I think that's the background for this. Switching off the slide. Again, just a couple of different ways to say some of this stuff, but whatever we fund, whatever you choose to fund, I would hope that it's fully funded. So there have been years where, in the past, where, if we trim a little bit off everybody, then everybody can run. I think, given the current environment, it's smart to really invest in whatever we want to keep going, and trying to do it all and underfunding programs would be extremely tough. We want to position whatever our portfolio ends up being for change and adjustments over the next few years. So moving into opportunities, like if we do here in an OFO, what space the AmeriCorps agency wants us in, that folks can be responsive and adjust their program model to fit that potentially. And then also recognizing there's some uncertainty right now, and that's not going to resolve itself super quickly. We, as always, want to lean into opportunities, and right now, particularly non-AmeriCorps opportunities. So, any plan to sort of think outside the AmeriCorps box is a good plan right now. And then, as always, whatever you decide to fund today, it's always recommended to allow for some budget and MSY adjustments after notifying folks of their awards to allow them to sort of take whatever we're offering and make it work perfectly with their plan. Obviously, we can't award more funds than we have. But there's potential that somebody could come back and say, we want fewer MSY because of whatever, making some small adjustments and you all allowing that room is always possible. These are some recommendations. The highlights are shifts that have been made as we've dialed in. So VHCB anticipates having $206,000 unexpended, basically because they couldn't fill slots because of the recruitment pause during the termination. So that's actually unexpended funds, that 206 part of their award that can only go to them. So no matter what else you decide, I would say they should receive that one way or another. Otherwise, that goes back to the Treasury. And then understanding that we have the math problem, essentially get VHCB where they need to be to fully run their program. And then Vermont State University would have to adjust their budget from where it's proposed. That adjustment or that proposed adjustment there, quite frankly, was to get the cost per MSY that we can award as close really as it's going to get. So VHCB would be operating around, again, everyone can make some small adjustments, but around $23,994 per MSY and $24,214 per MSY with Vermont State University. Any questions so far about any of these slides? I can go back and forth. Patrick.
Another question you probably can't answer, Phil, sorry, but it's probably one thinking others are thinking of it too. But going back to ECO, do we know why they have decided to opt out, or they're leaning toward opting out? Is it just the uncertainty of AmeriCorps funding right now, or is it something else that was?
I think the short summary would be it's the uncertainty. The Department of Environmental Conservation, very, exactly how we would hope they responded to the termination is how they did in deciding that even if they didn't have the federal funds and couldn't draw down federal funds in the future, they were going to support their current members through August. That is not a small bill that would end up on their state budget. And I think given the uncertainty and given the hoops they've already jumped through, that's where they're landing. And again, I'm going to push them as much as I possibly can to end, if they really want to end their program. I think at the end of a 3-year competitive cycle is a great time to do that. And they have one more year of competitive funding. So that would be our hope. And then at the same time, total understanding. And I think it's not unique across the country for organizations to actually be rescinding AmeriCorps grants, especially now. Folks were already doing that before this whole termination thing happened. And, it's tough. It's hard to run a program. And so organizations need to really be specifically committed to running an AmeriCorps program and running it because it is an AmeriCorps program and because of what it does for the community, just to remain interested. And that's not saying that any of our programs are not, but if they're anybody who has a choice of a different way to achieve what they're trying to do is largely moving away from AmeriCorps as they can. Again, unless they specifically want an AmeriCorps program because of what it means to run the program. It's a tough time.
Do we think, well, this is a ridiculous question. I'm thinking, if this award is happening under the administration versus canceling a prior administration's award, does that offer any security? And my personal view is draw the dollars one more year and then get out. If we can convince them to do that from a transitional support perspective, get the dollars into Vermont. I know you stated that already, Phil.
Yeah, and that's, I think all of our programs are currently aware that there would be risk and uncertainty in accepting an award. There's nothing that guarantees that either another round of terminations or who knows can happen in the future. We're getting really delayed responses from the AmeriCorps agency with fewer staff. So that's a whole other piece to work through. And so I think you're absolutely correct. Like this, anytime we're offered funding, I like to take it. And frankly, if everybody who applied to the competition had been offered competitive awards, I would still think we should take them all. We don't have any programs that we wouldn't want to support given funding. It's a question of funding right now. And so that the fact that ECO is sort of outside the formula conversation completely, like they're not running and we don't get that competitive award, and that is a loss to the state of Vermont, and we do want to mitigate that as much as we possibly can. But in terms of the formula funds, it doesn't change this equation, which I think is fortunate for us. We were considering them with everybody else in this equation, and then we're talking, we're 2 or even more than 2 programs short of funding. Gina, you can call on yourself too.
2 things. Can you just remind me the eco money that is available, it's competitive or formula?
It's competitively funded.
Okay. And then either this was in your email or maybe I already heard this from you, or maybe I came up with this right now. I can't remember, but is there a world in which you convince DEC to get that money, but then like subcontract it to VYCC or something like that for a year, or VHCB, and they just kind of pass the money through them, but like fund other.
Yeah, if we accept that award, or if the DEC accepts that award, they really have to run that program. There is some nuance where maybe another program could, help them with recruitment or identify candidates and, some kind of slightly creative arrangement. But generally speaking, it's either they run that program and that program runs, or it doesn't. I think the best mitigation plan we have for the loss of eco, or if they end up not accepting the funds, is really whatever host sites want to still be part of an AmeriCorps program, pointing them to VHDB, or I guess if they're in the Northeast Kingdom, or the twists on the position would fit with VTSU, but those are the three umbrella projects we have running now. And so if you lose an umbrella project, the other umbrella projects sort of become the default option.
Okay. It just makes me think, and maybe this is pie in the sky, but let's say DEC accepts it, and then what if they just, like, on a 1-year term hire someone from BYCC, and they just sort of like optically are operating through eco, but it's the same program as BYCC, so that BYCC still like gets fund, so somebody can use those funds for a year without DEC operating if they don't want to.
I think the way I want to respond to you right now is, in the past, we have had more options for getting creative and doing grant amendments and such to possibly adjust what a competitive program was doing, a competitively funded program. They are locked in to the program that was competitively funded. And so either that's what's competitively funded or that money is gone. It doesn't work like formula really. And so, in theory, there could be, in the past, there could be ways to make adjustments to make that work somehow. I think that would be really tough right now in the environment we're in. I mean, we're getting grant awards the day before the current grant expires, right? Like Vista, even having the Vista program was touch and go. So to try to do a significantly more complicated maneuver with programs, as desirable as that may be, it's sort of all or nothing. Like we either ECO runs the program they've been running, or it's more than likely nothing happens with that funding. Megan.
This is a divergence of topic a little bit, but once we're through with some of this conversation, I'm just wondering if there's time, if we can talk more about like what leaning into non-AmeriCorps initiatives would look like under the umbrella of SerVermont AmeriCorps funding. I'm just kind of curious what that is and what that would look like and how we could support that in the environment that we're in. So I had the thought and I didn't want to forget.
Yeah, and I think it's relevant here. So I sent a couple quick examples, but the one is we still have the partnership with Volunteer California, and there is still money on that grant. VHCB and ECO were the two programs involved in that, and that can, heavily supplement what we're able to award. So things like that, things like the work we're doing with the National Governors Association and Service to Career Pathways, which are inclusive of AmeriCorps, but not exclusive to AmeriCorps. So it could involve any other type of service and moving towards any type of career. And then things like with Vermont State University in particular, and we've been talking about this for years, but a education awards style program through the state university system, whether that is established through legislation or some other initiative that they can, those are things that are not funded by AmeriCorps, but would leverage what AmeriCorps resources we still have into more opportunities for folks to serve, and more benefits for folks who do that. If AmeriCorps, it's been zeroed out in the 2026 president's budget. If there is no AmeriCorps funding and we want service to career pathways and we want folks coming to Vermont to serve and we want them to get education benefits, we're going to have a local solution that doesn't rely on those resources that we've been working with. That's like the really quick version, and I actually think this is a sort of bottomless topic in some ways, because it really, starts looking to a world where we're not 99% funded by the AmeriCorps federal agency, and we are doing other types of work.
Would there be, like, do you think that the governor, or like whomever, right, would be like a disaster response could be part of this? I just feel like that's been such a huge part of, I mean, I know that's part of the VHCB stuff, but like, I just think of where you were at in 2023 and like how like that's a really Vermont focused potential initiative area of like, how could that be funded through the state? That like that's going to happen, and without FEMA or other things available, like the need for that's just going to skyrocket.
Totally. And I think, that's a relevant point here too, because as Danielle Danielle was working on having all of our programs or SerVermont programs be covered as an AmeriCorps disaster response team, and that we were planning on that being a relationship with the federal agency. That's not available right now as an option. But at the state level, we're trying to figure out, okay, then what does that look like without being an AmeriCorps disaster response team? And our umbrella projects have been leaning into that opportunity, thinking, how do we get our AmeriCorps members involved? Because again, like you're saying, 2023, everybody saw the necessity, just like we did during the pandemic, to have that be part of what we do. And I think that's absolutely, where we not only see real need on the ground in Vermont, but it's also a pretty practical solution. And then when we're not actively responding to disasters, which we still hope is all the time, folks are taking care of these other high priority issues. And I think from a policy standpoint, there would be more support for a situation like that than, lots of other programs that we have funded in the past that are really nice to have, but not, when you get to the core of it, really like critical to a specific issue of disaster response.
Yeah. Not to get too into the weeds of this, because I know this is not the point, but like I could see that being such like a cool thing to like partner with like EMT or like local ambulance or like folks like that who are often like volunteers already or like stipended individuals. Like it feels like a rich environment potentially to team with, because I know that system throughout the state is also not the most effective in the world. So
Right.
I mean,
and that's come up in some of the service to career work we're doing. And I would also say, we're also thinking of and working on like low cost, no cost ways that we can get folks more involved. So for example, FEMA has some independent study trainings online, at least they do right now and have in the past. And we're talking about making sure members are aware of those and then encouraging them to take them, because guess what, wherever they end up going on in their career, this is a topic that is going to be relevant forever, right? Or at least for as long as we're looking out. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's lots of creativity that can happen there. And who knows, in some instances, it seems tough right now, but there could be funding, like different sources of funding for some of these things. Or if you get a trade association to decide they really want to invest, we can run with that, like the paramedic example or EMT example. Like if they really want to invest in the service to career pathway, like there's a way to make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe, Phil, I know we have tough decisions to make, but it would be great to dig into the different pathways there in our next session, if it makes sense to, especially because if we are thinking about the different like challenges Vermont's facing, whether it's workforce specific or otherwise, maybe there's a private partnership path in a couple different directions that could make this whole you know, in the absence of federal funding in the future. So, I think we should spend time on that.
Absolutely, and this is moving too far ahead, but spoiler, September 18th, as of right now, is a tentative date when we're trying to pull together a service to career. What are we calling it? Can't think of it. But a gathering of people in the service to career space to talk about what pathways do we want to build out? What do those look like? What opportunities are already out there? How do we address these needs? So I think it's definitely an emerging space for sure. And we should talk about it more as a
That's cool.
I just want to say, I think we need to also, I understand the realities of this and it's, you know, it's devastating. Thing that is great about AmeriCorps is it was actually a federal investment in service. I know you all know that. And just to say, well, you know, going away, we're going to kind of try to do it by ourselves. It's different, and we just don't, you know, the capacity to really do that is, I don't want this to end, even if federal funding were to come to an end, if the budget zeroed out, et cetera. I also think this would be about as big of, you know, one of the silliest tragedies in the list of.
Yeah. And I would say, you know, we're, to be clear, right? We want to be looking to non-AmeriCorps opportunities that can be value added and kind of leverage what funding we do have. And then, you know, absolutely be fighting to maintain things. You know, I'm still very involved in America's service commissions and serving on the board and trying to make sure that we do sustain all of this. But as you can see, you know, we're facing reductions as it is. And, you know, the budget, the president's budget has zeroed out AmeriCorps before. So, you know, it's not like that's not what ends up actually happening. It's a suggestion. So it's definitely a both and Patrick, I agree. Yeah.
Okay,
I
well,
was-
we have some decisions to make now.
Yeah. And I was going to pull up while I struggle to find my cursor. Continue, Gina. I'm just pulling up a spreadsheet that we can sort of work from if we want.
Maybe before we move towards making decisions, I think, Jade, one of your questions was like, has there been a discussion with VYCC? And I know you've
No.
referenced Bill a handful of discussions, but maybe you could speak to like your awareness of where VYCC is at or would be at if their relationship formally with SerVermont ends before we decide next steps.
Yeah. We have had largely, there we go. We've had largely a similar conversation with everybody. Again, before we had results of the competition, actually before we had our formula allocation, we knew it was going to be tight. And so I don't, other than if we had, I don't know, like explicitly told specific people that their grant was at risk, which we did generally with everybody, right? I'm confident in saying that everybody is aware that we have this problem and that, or I shouldn't say problem, this challenge or limited amount of funding. And basically everybody has seen this chart. They know that there is a $500,000 gap between what has been requested and what we are able to do.
Asking my own question differently, do you think BYCC will be surprised? Knowing the history you shared with us, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, I would think they would be perhaps not surprised, but disappointed. You know, I wouldn't like this if I was them, or I wouldn't like not being offered an award. They have also been very aware of all of the challenges that we have faced. And, you know, we have limited funds to award. We should be proactively choosing how to spend those funds in a positive way, right? So again, you know, if we had a pile of funding, we should fund all of these, but we don't. And, you know, they do have the partnership with Core Network. They've had national direct grantees, and so they have potentially, I don't know, we know exactly what's going on with Core Network on the national direct side, but they have potentially a path forward where they are still involved in AmeriCorps as a national direct, whereas these others would not be. So in terms of sustainability and keeping various initiatives alive, it is not hyperbolic at all to say that there would be no program like what is happening at BTSU without an award from us. VHCB would not be running what they do without an award from us. And VYCC, it is, you know, they're the core service programs and being part of the Core Network, a service core, is what they are. And so their path is not completely reliant on us. Will they have fewer resources? Probably. Will they certainly have fewer federal resources? You know, almost guaranteed. Yeah, and it's not, you know, I wish it were different. But I think looking at our capacity, looking at how our staff are going to be spending time, what we're able to do in terms of navigating all of this with our programs, it's difficult. It's a difficult path forward no matter what.
It's, maybe this goes without saying, but it's stark to look at, like, there are almost 80 slots for that program, and just to think about all of those not being a part of the SerVermont or the AmeriCorps community feels so, I don't know, it's so hard to imagine.
Oh,
So I'm just sitting with that. I'm sure all of us are.
I mean, BYCC definitely holds a significant number of slots. And they hold a very significant portion of the non-full-time slots.
So we need a motion here to move forward, right? In one capacity or another.
We do. And I always 100% respect the recommendations that come from staff, but this is like the one and only kind of opportunity before we move forward to continue to discuss or like turn stones over, or whatever that phrase is, to make sure we're not like missing anything. So I just want to, not to beat a dead horse, but make sure that if anyone has like an idea or a question or a thought that they want to offer, now is the time for that.
I guess my 2 cents, Gina, is I think I agree with the recommendation. My only lingering thought or idea is whether we can continue to engage with BYCC and or any members they do have through alternative paths in their future within the community. I don't have a direct AmeriCorps history myself, but it seems like, maintaining an affiliation there might be of value, just as a nice to have.
Absolutely. And, I've been struggling a lot with all of this. This is the first time we've really had to make super tough funding decisions. We've had tight funding years where there were very natural, programs that needed to or wanted to wrap up. And I don't know that an organization's strengths, an organization's strengths would not be a reason we would want to not give them funding. But when you talk about alternative paths, VYCC has some really strong paths for their members, and they did before we had an AmeriCorps state grant there. And again, I think they would. And they're certainly, they're in the service to career space. They're part of that work. So I do think we would certainly have overlapping interests moving forward for sure.
Gina, first of all, I really appreciate you asking us to pump the brakes and just make sure that we're really thinking about this. I think that's smart and that's good leadership, and I appreciate the sense. My understanding is our options are effectively, though, either not fund VYCC or not fund VTSU or not fund VHCB or fund all of them, but at a reduced funding, which would potentially, if we were to take option 4, whichever that final option that I just mentioned, that potentially hamstrings all 3 of the programs. And what I hear you kind of suggesting, Phil, is that while not ideal, VICC might be best suited to walk on its own, at least in the short term, in case more funding doesn't come through.
Yes, that's another way to summarize it. And I would highlight an example like, and again, right, in an ideal world, we are leaning into strengths, and then with strong money from us and strong money from other sources, everybody is moving forward, right? VYCC, since the termination, has had a fundraising campaign, and I think just last week they sent out an update that they've raised $60,000 in that. Is that going to fully fund the program? No. Is that, we would love it if that could be leveraged towards something else involving AmeriCorps, but, that is not going to happen with the VTSU program. They can't do that, right? So it's sort of we're in a tough spot. You're in a tough spot.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Just from me personally, it's hard to like envision 5 minutes from now saying yay to something where I don't understand what the implications of this are going to be for VYCC. I hear that you're saying that they're in a better position than other organizations. And I just like feel, I don't know. I just wanted to be honest about how I'm like at a standstill in my own mind, personally. That's not like a helpful thing to say, but that's where I'm at.
I mean, if I may, this body has traditionally brought a lot of genuine, intent to do right by everybody. And our staff has, and we're very unique here in Vermont because, and frankly, I've been envious of other states sometimes because when they have a math problem, maybe they have, imagine this at a greater scale, right? Imagine if we were looking at 25 applicants and we could fund 10, it becomes less, right? It's not as much the scale where we actually like genuinely care about each and every one of these programs. And at the end of the day, you still have that math problem. And that's where, when discussing as a staff and looking at, what are the strongest programs that we can lean into and the strongest AmeriCorps programs that have the most opportunity to push through whatever it is we face in the next while here. That's an easier way for me to think about it. Affirmatively, what do we want more of and what is working best right now and what is most likely to be successful in these difficult times versus looking at this as any kind of, what's the worst? Because the reality is like, even if we were looking at all the programs we currently fund, if they all wanted formula funding in this, like we can't run them all. And I am, there have been times in our history where dividing the money up evenly or whatever was chosen, and including in the first competition I was a part of. And that was not great. We went back to everybody and said, redo your application. You're at like 2/3 of whatever you asked or whatever. And that's really the other concern here. I hate to say it, but our time is really tight. And so getting too complicated sort of risks missing deadlines and pushing this out farther than we realistically can to have any hope of anybody being successful with the next program.
And understanding that VYC, like, am I right with this, that VYCC's time frame is a little different than everyone else's? So their 25-26 requests are for people they would bring on in the spring of 26, right?
Most of them. They would bring some folks on in the fall. They're 3/4 time folks that they currently support and propose to support start in the fall, a little bit later in the fall than full-time members, but they start in the fall, and then a bulk of those 79 positions start in, it would usually be May.
Right. And so, like, maybe just to convince myself, like, to get on board with where I think this might be headed, compared to another program, they do have the gift of more lead time to contingency plan compared to other programs.
That would be true for the most part. I would say we've never operated with this exact timeline that we have right now. And so if whoever we offer awards to, if they came back and said, we want to delay the start of our program year because we just can't be up and running by September 1 now, I think we should do that. So whoever we fund could have a timeline that looks more like what BYCC has traditionally had. So I don't want to be, I don't want to say no, they all start September 1 and that's it. They could potentially adjust. But when looking at our traditional program schedule, that would be accurate.
Understood.
Last question for me. In delivering this to, if we go with your direction, Phil, I assume we as a team could offer some support to VYCC in terms of like transitional connections and things like that if they need any, but we also know they already have some of their own, right? So they
Yeah,
have a ramp.
absolutely. And their current grant runs through November. So
Yeah.
we're still working with them and we would support them in whatever, paths they were trying to go down. Yeah.
And I'm not wrong, Phil, that in your email, did you say that they still have Vista support there or no?
No, they don't have this to support
Okay.
there. What I was sharing in my email is just that there is a, this is tough. This is a very tough position to be in. But there is certainly a way to view it that exactly what should happen with AmeriCorps resources happened there on the farm. And they started with one vista, they had more vistas. Eventually it wasn't capacity that needed built and starting a farm, but it was operating that farm. And that was when they transitioned to AmeriCorps state resources. And now they've had those for a while. They are at the end of a competitive cycle. And so there's a natural cadence or transition to it. Now, would we have chosen this to be the point if we had all the options in the world? No. I think that's absolutely true. But is there an element to it that is, more natural than pulling resources from somewhere that hasn't quite gotten there, or as intermediary projects can continue to bring on new host sites and get AmeriCorps resources farther out into more communities? Like it's there's a piece about it that it's actually like a textbook how national service was supposed to work as intended. Does that make it easier? No. It's still tough. Gina.
I'm forgetting the term for it, but I know that there are those grants that some programs have used to do like monitoring and evaluation work.
Yes.
And is there such thing as like a program applying for funds that are like sunsetting scope of work specific grants? Or if there is like a $13,000 or $14,000 gap between if we don't fund VYCC, what will still be left? Is there some world in which where we're like, we know that you can't just cold turkey not continue to have all of this support, financial support? Like, is there some kind of resource we could point them to so that they have a little bit of cushion?
Yeah. So to answer the first part of what you were saying, so they received a funding to have an evaluation for their program from us. They have also received planning grants. At least one, but I actually think two. I think we had a planning grant with them when we started them too. And then they had one more recently. And those are really the non-operational grants that we can offer. Sunsetting a program and program closeout is, for lack of a better description, part of what happens with any award within the scope of that award. This is a very interesting year because in theory, they're, not the grant that was attempted to be terminated, that was not, they should be able to draw that full amount down. And that will have to cover whatever it would be.
I'd like to make a motion if the group is good. I motion to accept the staff's recommendation to continue to fund VHCB and VTSU and sunset the VYCC program. Did that cover it?
Do you, yeah,
As recommended.
okay.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept the staff's recommendations and continue to fund VHCB and VTSU as recommended. Is there any discussion?
Phil, would it be helpful to add anything to like a contingency should there be any additional things that come back from either of these programs around this?
Great question. Sometimes we've had that formally in there, sometimes not, I think. I think it's making sure you all understand that when we go back to people with this, they may have adjustments they need to make within reason. I always say like setting a specific dollar threshold would be tough. You could, can I do this? You could, can you all even see that? Probably not. Let's go here. You could just, if Jade wanted to amend the motion, you could say this like specific amounts here and, with edits, with program directed edits or applicant directed edits or something like that.
Okay, so I amend my motion to adopt the staff's recommendation to continue to fund VHCB and VTSU at the recommended numbers, as well as consider adjustments as requested by the funded organizations.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Ben.
So now we're going, you okay with that, Chris? Now we're going with Jade and Megan. Okay, Jade and Megan. I think you can call it, Gina.
Okay, so I was gonna say it's like a formality, I'm supposed to repeat it, but that's like a lot of words. So, sorry, it is moved and seconded that VHCB and VTSU are funded as recommended with the potential for them to make changes before the deadline and to not fund VYCC this fiscal year.
I think you want to leave the affirmative motion in place and don't add that second part.
Okay,
So the
Sorry.
motion should only award funds. Is usually
Okay.
how we handle it.
okay, so all those in favor of funding VHCB and VTSU as recommended with the understanding that there might be slight edits before the deadline, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. Is anybody abstaining? Okay, the motion is carried.
Okay. Whoops, now I need to switch back to my slide. Thank you all, and I appreciate your participation in this is a tough moment. Maybe we get I get a little bit of, comfort knowing that this is not unique across the country. We didn't do anything differently than anybody else that put us in a tough position or whatever. It's just how it is. The last thing on the agenda was just talking about upcoming events. We will work on scheduling our next meeting, which would typically be in September. I hope we can wait that long perhaps, but we might not be able to. We'll get on that. And then September 18th is the tentative date for that service group pathways convening. And it would be great to have at least a couple of commissioners there. You're all welcome to participate. It'll be bigger than, again, just the AmeriCorps National Service family, but also inclusive of that. And I think that's all we have on the agenda.
Do you know where that's going to be on September 18th?
We don't.
Okay.
Presumably somewhere as central as can be, or near the most people who are coming, or whatever that might look like.
Bill, you survey us on meeting times, right?
Yes,
Okay.
usually.
I like the latter half of September. Just putting that out.
Yeah. September is a tough month for us always. Usually we have our national convening, although we don't know exactly when or if that's gonna happen, frankly. We know AmeriCorps is not holding it, but I think our association might, so it's usually later in September. Sometimes it has become early October that we have that meeting. But we'll propose some times and see. Gina, you wanna wrap us?
Sure. And I was going to say, thank you all the team for really like going through all of the ups and downs with this. And I hope you get some time to relax this summer too, but keep us posted on like that plaintiff thing.
Will do. We will keep you updated for sure. I appreciate that, Gene.
Okay. Well then, if there is a movement to adjourn, then we can do that.
I can move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
so much. Take care, everybody.
See ya.